Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is Bruce Hutchin, your host at Whitetail Rendezvous one more time. And it's been a long day for me, so I hope I don't get too slap happy. But in all seriousness, I'm just really pleased to have a featured guest this evening, Joseph Byler. And Zombie Deer and the Tine Buck is a book that he's coming out with, and it's out already. And he's an author, but he's more than that. He's a guy that cares about his family, cares about growing people, and he invests in himself. In the warm-up, we talked about a lot of different things. And one thing that I shared with him, and I'll share with you right now, he's the type of guy that gets to the heart of the matter, and that can apply in any area of your life. But we're going to talk tonight about Zombie Deer and the Tine Buck. Whitetail Rendezvous and Strike Force Energy have joined together. What have they joined together to do? Well, they joined together to help you kick the can. That's right. Strike Force Energy is the fastest growing new energy drink on Amazon today. It's simple. All you do is rip, drip, and sip. That's it. No sugar, no crash, no calories. It gives you the ability to focus and stay in the stand, stay on the hunt all day long without carrying around a can. When I get a sample pack, simply go to strikeforceenergy.com, put in WR free, and you'll get a 4-count sample pack from Strike Force Energy. Joseph, let's go.
All right. Glad to be here with you, man.
How did you end up writing a book?
Oh, well, I'm going to do the short version. So I wouldn't consider myself a writer growing up. I wrote the same thing over and over again growing up. It was about Bo Jackson. It was a book called The Amazing Bo Jackson. And I wrote numerous papers about this book because I loved it. And the reason I'm saying that is because you don't have to be a polished writer to be an author. I have 2 ebooks I wrote. My wife and I together, we co-authored it. And a couple years ago, we actually pulled them offline. And now we are going to put them into paperback form. And they're going to be more like a manual. So I was working on that kind of thing. And I had a friend, a really good friend of mine. He owns a company called Massive Mineral Mix out of Springport, Michigan. And it's a mineral company for deer minerals, whitetail deer. And he's had so much success with this mineral, selling it as a small company. It's went all over the country. I believe he has over 100 retailers. And it is the best mineral that I've ever used. And all the people I know that use it, they swear by it. Anyway, so he was asking me about just giving him a review about his product. And I kept telling him, like, okay, I will. I'll write a review about it. But there's so much more than that, I would tell him. And he was like, why is there so much more than that? Just write something down and so I can put it out there. And I kept telling him this went on for a few years. And I said, Jack, I can't just write a review. It's so much more than that. So one night, this was last year, my wife told me, you need to have a brain dump and you just need to get all these things out of your mind because I had all these projects going on. I had all these different books I wanted to write and I started a bunch of them and then I would float to the next one. And so I did a brain dump and I just started getting it all out of my mind of what this review was that he kept telling me to write. And it was a story about a buck that I was after for many, many years. And I never told anybody about the back end of the story because I'm a man, we just sometimes don't want to share our heart as far as our feelings out in the woods when we're trying to chase an animal, no matter what kind of animal or what kind of sport, archery, firearm or whatever. So I started thinking back when, you know who Donnie Vincent is?
No, I don't.
So Donnie Vincent, he had a movie called The Rivers Divide. And
was he in the Badlands?
Yes.
He was in Badlands. I did not go to that at ATA. So I do know the name. I've never met the gentleman.
Okay. So he was a hunter that when that movie trailer came out a long time ago, it caught my eye because I was like, wow, like this is a little bit unique. And when I saw the trailer, I started to think of the deer I was chasing for a long time. I just never really told anybody about it because I just didn't really want to share all that stuff with people. So I watched his movie and I was totally inspired by it. And I was inspired by my buddy telling me, write this review. I don't care what you do, just do it. And so I did a brain dump. Like my wife said, I started writing and I wrote for, I don't know how many hours I wrote, but I got like half the book done. And then I sort of like sectioned off the rest of it of how I wanted it to end. And well, I knew the ending, but like I wanted how I was going to pattern this thing. And so I finished it, went through the editing process, and, I end up actually pulling some things out because I didn't want a really long book. I wanted something that sounded like your podcast, or we're just talking like two guys talking about hunting. I wanted it to be more like me and my friend are hanging out and I'm going to explain to him my heart and my feelings about these hunts I was on. And I looked back at the amazing Bo Jackson. Okay. I got to say this because it's just sort of funny. The book that I read over and over and over and over again as a kid, and even in college, which was funny because I actually wrote reports and different papers on the same book. It's because I could sit at one time and read the whole thing all the way through. And so I started thinking, you know what? I'm going to make this the same way because I like doing that. So I want to find other people that are like me that are going to enjoy what I like. So that's why I did it the way I did it. And so it's only 60 pages, but it's to the point, and I just explained the whole journey of harvesting this deer.
So zombie deer, I mean, was there a zombie, or did you kill him and then he kept coming back, or what?
So the book starts out as I see this young deer as a 1.5-year-old, and I'm hunting on the ground. And he was a little bit out of his mind. He just acted a little bit sporadic. He was very unique. He had a high brow tine on one side. It was really easy to identify him. I had so many deer at the time where I was hunting that year. There were deer everywhere. I mean, 1.5-year-olds after 1.5-year-olds. I mean, sometimes I think I counted 15, like one 24-hour hunt. So like what I mean is I hunted one afternoon all the way to the night and then all the way the next day. So I just call that a 24-hour hunt. I saw 15 different 1.5-year-olds, but that guy right there, he stood out, and you could just tell instantly what his rack looked like. His shape of his body was different than everybody else's. So I had so many encounters with this 1.5-year-old. I just kept letting him go because I'm going to try to shoot a 3.5 and bigger. This deer just wouldn't leave me alone. And the things I learned from this young deer were he was so spontaneous. I mean, he literally acted like a little kid in gym class. Like he really was just a immature little boy running around having the world to himself. So I had some encounters, and I explained that in the book with him, that I've never heard of anybody having sort of like a relationship with a deer like this. And when he gets old enough for me to go out and kill this deer, the chase was on, and he definitely wasn't the little scaredy cat like he was when he was a young buck. And that's when it got to be the real deal, because I had seen him and I had limited hunting space, that's frustrating for anybody. I do live in Michigan, so people think automatically great public land. Well, there is great public land here, but you got to go deep. You got to go deep in there, and there are so many guys out there. I'm sure this is the same way in every single state there is, but Michigan gets really, really bad. I mean, people will literally just park on the side of the road and walk on private land. Guys just funneling out, just hunting. Let's go on everyone's land and just start hunting. So I didn't really want to go out and hunt on public land. I wanted to hunt on our property, my family property. So I had to be smart. I had to learn from a lot of, I watched so many videos and met a lot of guys that knew how to hunt, and, just trying to get what their perspective was on how to hunt a smaller parcel, and then having neighbors that just trample on everyone's land all the time like it's theirs. It's just frustrating. And you have to be nice with these neighbors. These are your neighbors. So it's like, if you're not nice with them, then you're going to have the neighborhood flack. And when you're out in the country, that's not a fun thing to have. in amongst of all these things for me trying to harvest this animal, a lot of people know EHD, and EHD outbreak was so huge in 2012. It just decimated this area of the state. It hit a lot of the state, but the areas that I hunted on, it just decimated it. Like, it was literally a ghost town. So it just made it really tough, because in 2012, this deer was 6.5 years old. And that was the year that I had that deer patterned so tightly. I'm using a different method than I've used before. Instead of going out deeper in our 30 acres that we were hunting at the time, where all the trespassers were and all the neighbors were trampling through, they would lie all the time. They would say, we're not walking through there, but they would just walk through there and leave their wrappers everywhere. I mean, it felt like your hunting world is just being shrunk, because it's just so irresponsible. So I had to come up with something, and I went to some quality deer management seminars and stuff. And when I switched minerals, I saw something happen. And I also decided to do it, like put a mineral site like right behind my parents' property. I mean, this thing was right in the backyard almost. Let's say 2 different houses could see where it would be if they knew it was there. And I decided to make this place right off the swamp, try to draw some deer in. It was sort of like a big water hole, actually, where it naturally just got sort of dug out, and it was sort of like a small pond, and there's acorns there. And I decided, you know what? And I had a food plot there. I did some forage oats, and that seemed to help a little bit. But when I added the minerals there, I had it under a tree with a big branch where they can get their antlers up in there and stuff. Right away, I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be dreamland hunting right here. This little tiny 3 acres is going to be the key. So I started tracking this deer on camera every 3 to 4 days. It was the same 2 deer over and over and over. And this thing always looked the same since it was 1.5 years, other than a bigger rack and a giant body. It looked exactly the same. I had trail cam pictures of him all the way to that date, and you could just tell who he was anytime he was around, because he had an attitude and he just had a persona about him. Because I was obsessed with this deer, it just became easy, and I just wasn't satisfied until I had him harvested. And it was going to be the death of me, because that year, 2012, not only did EHD hit and I lost track of him in September and October, it was a year I actually went, outside of hunting. I dove in, and a dream I had when I was 17, I went and purchased a fitness center. That was my occupational dream, is to own a fitness center. So trying so hard to get this deer. And then on the flip side, I had a new son, and I had my daughter that was already 2. So I had 2 new kids. And then I went in and bought a fitness center, and we grew that fitness center to over 800 people, 800 members, which is just unbelievable in a town of 6,000 people. So having the stresses of all this new business stuff that I was honestly prepared for, I prepared myself for this for many years. When I could get out in the woods, and a lot of people can relate to this, there's just nothing else unless you're with a date with your wife. And that's, it's a hot date with your wife, which cannot be beaten. But if you're out in the woods and you have all the stresses of work, even though it's your passion, there's nothing like it, because the creation is just nothing like it. And you just feel the freedom, and you feel the freedom, and you feel like you're actually out there trying to really accomplish something great, no matter what kind of animal you're trying to harvest. But it's just a great feeling. And that was a really big help for my skills moving forward, my mindset. So that was an important thing, is going out there hunting and then trying to get that deer, which I call him the brow tine buck. It was made that year really, really special.
You mentioned a lot of situations everybody has on public land and private land, especially when it's competitive hunting. That's what I call it. And one thing that I picked up on, you figured out how to hit the fringe, and because you knew where the trespassers were going, they were blowing out the middle of your property. So you're going to hunt the fringe, and then you have to build a sanctuary where only you're going to hunt.
Exactly.
And you're the only guy that's even going to think of hunting there. So then you throw some minerals in there and you throw some things that'll track deer. And the more you track deer, then they'll come in because they're not getting pressured. The second biggest buck we ever took off the farm, and it was in his junkyard. His farmers have junk. And he was on his tractor and he was going out to spread some manure, and he saw some tines in the junk. And so the biggest buck at that time, he saw it and he went, oh my goodness. Yeah. And it was hunting season. So he kept the tracker running, and then he got down, got his rifle, and he snuck around, kept the wind right and everything, and just yelled, and the buck stood up and he shot it from 20 yards.
Oh my goodness.
And it was 173 jungle, non-typical, 173. But he saw the tines and he was bedded right in the junk. I mean, we're talking farm parts for, old bins and parts of tractors, just junk. But that's where that buck was, right by the farm road. Wow. I mean, he wasn't 20 yards off the farm road because that's where Eddie shot him. And people don't believe how tight those mature bucks will do it because they know where people are typically go. They'll know their actions, and they know where people won't look for bucks.
Right. And the crazy thing about the brow tine buck was when I first saw him, that's the exact area that he kept coming every single time. So as a 1.5-year-old, he never got off that, which, it just depends on what other deer are around. But like I said, I had 15 different bucks in 2007 were 1.5-year-olds, and it was the same exact spot. So I just thought, have you heard of Tony Hansen before?
Mm-mm.
So he's a really big writer and editor. I believe it might be Outdoor Life or Field and Stream now, but I'm not sure on that. But he has a company called Antler Geeks. And I went hunting with him one time, and we were having lunch, and there was a group of us and my Amish family that was there. So Tony was there, and he was deep in thought as we were eating lunch real quick to go back out. And my cousin said, hey, what's going on, man? You're pretty quiet. And he said, I'm just trying to figure this out. And he said, I'm not trying to overthink hunting right now. He's a great hunter. The guy has harvested so many animals, and he's been all over the place. And that made me think too, like, we can't overcomplicate it. This experience actually, and even before that, I noticed as a young kid when I was in my teens, it was in the middle of the rut. And I saw so many bucks when I was younger, especially before some of the neighborhood people started moving in different, start tearing down land and building houses. It didn't matter what I wore. It was just one of them areas. I could come out of a candle store with fruit scent and go up a 10-foot ladder stand and a giant 180 walk by. I am not even kidding you. Like, this property, it was a dump, sort of like you talked about. So this property had an old dump on it. And this is the same land the brow tine buck was on. And you could go there any time of day. It doesn't matter. I'm telling you, it doesn't matter what time of day you can go there. You're going to see a giant buck. It was just one of those places that's what was happening. And then as soon as the houses got in and then people started trampling all over the place, everything changed. So what I grew up with, I had to relearn everything because I started overcomplicating it. And then I went back to simplifying hunting and saying, you know what? The resources I have right now are slim. What can I do with the resources I do have? I have, to me, the greatest mineral that I've ever seen. I'm going to use that. And I'm going to use this little tiny parcel that's secluded. And I'm going to make this a little haven. They got water right there. You got a food plot over there. They got the minerals here. They got cover, and no one's trampling this area. And that buck stayed on that same spot for his entire 6.5 years. So when Tony said he's trying to figure it out and he doesn't want to overcomplicate it, it sort of clicked in my mind. Like, I remember when he said that, and there's no need to overcomplicate things. Some people, to me, I think get a little bit nervous. They're in the rut. They get nervous about going in and, you need to check your wind and your scent and all that. I 100% believe that. But sometimes I think they're too nervous to get in a place and hunt a specific area because they think they're going to spook off everything. But you got to remember, these deer, these are men. These are male deer. So when they're amped up and ready, are they going to do some stupid things? Yes, 100%. when you're a teenager, boys are going to do some stupid things. They're not going to think. And I think the deer are like that. And people need to take a little more chances sometimes in getting in a place and trying to harvest a deer they really want to go after. Like I said, you still got to be smart about it, but don't be scared. I mean, it's an animal. Go in there and get it. Because if you don't try, how are you going to know it? How are you going to do it? My best friend lives in Montana. And he said, you're never going to shoot that big buck sitting on your couch thinking about it. And that's the true statement. And I think more people need to do that.
Whitetail Rendezvous is pleased to announce a partnership with GoHunt.com. Who's GoHunt.com? Well, if you're a DIY hunter, you need the information at GoHunt.com/insider. Why? Because it provides 4,200 profiles, every unit, every species, and every season. Furthermore, they give in-depth analysis, interactive maps, unit access, and seasonal trends. Draw odds are very important, and they give you the most accurate information in the business. All this is available when you go to GoHunt.com/insider. Make sure you use promo code WR when you join Insider. You'll get a $50 gift card for GoHunt.com Gear Shop. All in all, if you're hunting out west in 2018, GoHunt.com Insider is where you need to be to get all the research information. When you use promo code WR, Whitetail Rendezvous receives a small commission from GoHunt.com.
You got to be in the woods. One, to shoot any buck, you have to be in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Two, to shoot a big buck, a mature buck, 4.5 years old, you have to be where those deer are. Now, in some areas, brown them down, and people are going to eat them, and they could care less. They want to get their buck, and they're going to shoot their buck. They're going to shoot a doe, and they're going to eat the food, and that's all they care about. And you mentioned QDMA, and folks, if you don't know about QDMA, you ought to get involved because they have the best research-based information that you're going to find any place in the country. But if you want to shoot a big buck, you have to go where they are because you can fish for big trout, 20-inch trout, and if there's only brookies that are 6 inches long in this hole, you're never going to catch that big trout. Never going to happen.
Right.
It's just never going to happen. And don't beat yourself up about it. And if your land, and that's why game cameras and trail cameras are such a boon because we can take a census of, okay, what do I have? How do you do that? You put out minerals. If your state, it's legal in your state. You put out food plot. You put out whatever. So you can, not just a trail camera. You have deer coming to a specific place to get a specific protein or minerals that they need. And then you can get a census of what you got. And then you can say, okay, this is what I got. And realistically, if because of the hunting situation, 1.5-year-old deer, a 2.5-year-old deer is the biggest it's going to get, then make a choice. Either going to shoot them or figure out how you can get those deer into a sanctuary where they can grow. And it's
right.
tough.
Right. And, in this same area too, we had trees, before I didn't really know. I've heard of hinge cutting and stuff like that, but it wasn't the first thing in my mind. Like, oh man, it's actually hinge cut right now. But there were a lot of trees that knocked down right there in that spot, and the briars are thick. I mean, the only path that this deer had other than just coming out of the swamp, like literally 100 feet from the swamp, just coming out was a food plot, but it wouldn't even go in the food plot. It literally came in, would dink around and eat the minerals. Sometimes it was every single day. Sometimes it was every third day, but it was every 3 to 4 days. But he had a big 9-point with him that year too, the whole entire time. Rarely did he ever come alone. It was with a 9-point, and he was a sweet buck too. After looking at it over and over in 2012, I think he was probably a 5-year-old deer. He was pretty gnarly too. Like, he was just a sweet deer. But the brow tine buck was a special buck, man. And I'll tell you what, the story behind it, it taught me a lot of lessons. It really did. It taught me a lot about hunting. It taught me a lot about life, because I'm telling you, and you know exactly what I'm talking about, and people like this. There's so many people that are stressed out at their job. They hate their job, or they hate this and they hate that, and they're stressed about it. And then what stresses them out even more is they're not hunting. So then that's another ball of stress. To those people, you just got to put your camouflage on. You got to go out there, because even if you don't see a squirrel, you're still going to learn something. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to have an opportunity to be alone You're not going to have all the distractions, especially if you're not playing a game on your phone out there in the woods like a lot of people do. Everyone needs a quiet time every single day, reading your Bible, just having your thoughts organized. It's good to have a little scratch pad, start writing things down, what's in your mind every single day. I go in streaks where I do that, and then I go in streaks where I don't. But if you do it every single day, there's a big relief that comes from you. But if you're in the woods, I have this little tiny spiral notepad that I would write different things down when I'm in the woods. And I'm telling you what, when you're in that time when you're really dumping out your brain, you start actually hearing nature more. That's what I experience anyway. When you hear something, then you're like, oh, what was that? And then it's like, oh, that was nothing. But you're deep in thought. You're focusing on what you're doing. You're out in the woods. You're enjoying creation. And, that's really the whole key. It's just getting out there. I mean, Michigan, I'm telling you, this year we've had a January winter in November. It was ridiculously cold, snowy. But I'll tell you what, it was nasty early in the year like that. But I'm telling you, as much as I could go, I'm going. And I've been seeing a whole lot of deer the last few years, but it's important. It's important for anybody. I see a lot of women hunting now, I think is just awesome. I just think it gives every person, I believe, peace just to go out and spend time out in the outdoors, no matter what you're doing.
And some people won't understand a word you said.
Exactly.
No, and that's really sad because, folks, if you just listen to what Joseph said, that's the essence of hunting and what keeps us coming back and going to wild places and going to places that it's hard to get to. But once you get there, I call it a place called there. You find it and then you find yourself.
Yeah, that's really good.
You got to find yourself. And if you're living in a stressful life, you'll never find yourself. You'll never find your place called there. And it's just, that's the way it is. And you can prove me right, prove me wrong. But that's the way it is. And through the solitude, through the intimacy with nature and sitting, because of my accident and everything, I hunt from the ground now. And, to have deer 10 feet away and they know you're there and they're there, but they just walk away. They don't run away. They're aware of your presence as you're aware of theirs, but they just walk away. And you just watching them and you're going, wow. Did that just happen? And then you get the memory of that. And that's the essence of hunting, to see how close I can get to deer and be amongst the deer without them just completely blowing up.
Right. Bruce, I remember you saying about an accident. And when I first started hunting the brow tine buck, I was on the ground and I hunted the ground a lot because when I was 10, the very first buck I shot, I was on the ground and I walked up on it. And that's a different story. But hunting on the ground makes everything change. Deer look bigger. They're in your face. And if the listeners end up buying the book and reading it, they'll see what I'm talking about as far as deer getting in your face. I relate with that story because I got in a tree stand accident in 2010 that was absolutely the worst thing I could have ever imagined about. We're both probably pretty lucky to be alive right now. I can tell you that.
Yeah, the big guys get all the plans for me. That's what everybody told me. I said, okay, fine.
Yeah.
However that works.
I can say this. I'm a big tree harness person. Even if I'm hunting on the ground, I wear one sometimes because it has my binocular holder on it and makes me feel like I'm more secure with all my gear. But make sure you don't unhook it when you're coming down the tree. And that's the dumbest thing I've ever done.
What happened?
I had an opportunity to hunt this other 30 acres close to the Kalamazoo River, it's just a really good spot. I had the property that I was going after the brow tine buck on, and I would jump back and forth from there to here, this other land. So I'm on this other land and I didn't work that morning and I go out hunting and I didn't tell anybody where I was hunting. So that was a mistake. My dad and my parents and my wife, they just knew I was out hunting that morning. I made a mock scrape and shameless plug here, but I sprayed buck bomb on it. And it was right in the peak of the rut. And I hear some stuff coming and this doe just comes barreling through the brush. And I heard a big grunt coming after it. This doe come right through and sprinted through. And I'm like, oh yeah, baby. I saw the deer's body and I knew right away, this is a giant deer. this is a old deer. I mean, he was a monster. So he come through and I knew right away I'm going to shoot him. And he come running along where the doe was. He sprinted after the doe, the trail the doe was on. He stopped and put his head up and went down to the ground and literally beelined right to my mock scrape I made 15 yards from me. And I shot him. He ran the way he came and stood there like a statue and jumped up, hit his head on a tree. And I think he broke his neck right there. He just did the weirdest thing. I just never seen this before. And it was only about 30 yards away. And I'm like so geeked. I mean, he had a really nice rack on. I'm not going to say he didn't. He was a big deer. The guy who actually cleaned him for me and processed him, he said he was probably a 7 to 9 year old. I mean, he was old, dude. He was big too. So I was coming down the tree and I was excited. Right after I shot him, I called my dad. I said, hey, I shot a big buck and you got to come see this thing. Didn't even tell him where I'm at. Then I called my wife, said, hey, I shot a big buck. I'm so excited about this thing. And he's like the oldest thing I ever seen out here. And I am just geeked. So I'm like, yes, put in my phone in my backpack, put my backpack on, and I'm coming right down because I mean, he's laying right there dead. And so I'm coming down with my tree climber and I was up about 20 to 21 feet. And there was like a crotch in the tree right there. And my string that holds my bow is 20 feet. And my bow was off the ground. So I'm coming down. It was one of those, I hate saying this because it's so dumb. And I know people do it, but this tree was just like one of those trees that you can't let go. It's like a perfect tree in a perfect spot. And there's no other tree around. And it's a tree that you shouldn't climb with a climber. But I'm a man and I'm going to do dumb things like this. I'm just going to adjust my tree stand 4 different times to the top. So going up and down, it's 4 times. I've climbed this tree a lot. 4 times on the way up, 4 times on the way down. So on my way down, I got about 7 feet off the ground and I unhooked my tree harness because I'm sliding it down with me. And I unhook the top where the seat is and move it down and accidentally put pressure on the back part of the seat where I'm facing the tree, but the bar is around my back end. And I fell backwards and my feet are in the stirrups. And this thing has an angle on it that is, you cannot get out of this thing. So I fall, my head hits the tree in the bottom, swings underneath it. Boom. My feet are in the stirrups. It knocks me out. I'm seeing stars. My feet are stuck. I'm dangling for I don't know how many minutes and I'm trying to pull up and I'm like, man, I'm too heavy. So I undo my backpack and that thing falls and hits the ground. And so I'm like, I'm a little lighter, but I know I'm a builder and I know like angles and I'm not going to get out of this angle. This angle is impossible to do an ab crunch over. It's just not going to happen. So I lose all feeling in my legs. I'm losing feeling in my left arm as I'm struggling because I had an arm guard on. And so like that's tangled and it's cut the circulation off on my hand. And now I'm starting to see like stars and it's black. I'm about to black out completely. And I'm struggling. And I'm like, I'm not going to get out of this. I'm going to die right here. And the thing is, my hand, my tip of my finger could touch the ground, the leaves. That's how close I was to the ground. So I'm literally upside down, feet in the stirrups. The bottom of the platform is pulling my knees apart. I can't feel my body, can't see. And I just begin to pray out loud. I'm screaming to God. I say, God, I don't want to die this way. And I really believe that you're not going to let this happen. Let me die this way. And I had no energy left. I had one arm that was free. And I kept praying for a trespasser to come through and like see a struggling man and help him. No one knows where I'm at. And I said, you got to start thinking about something here. And I'm praying. And my fingers are touching the leaves and I feel the string of my bow of like the string that it's hooked on to pull it up. So with my hand, I'm pulling the string with my fingers and now I can't see anything. I'm literally on the brink of going out. Then all of a sudden I feel the fletching of my arrow and I'm like, well, there's my arrow. I'm just going to start cutting at my foot, whether it's my foot, whether it's my shoelace, bootlace, I don't care what it is. I'm going to start cutting it. So I go up there and I start hitting and pushing like a javelin, like a spear just at my foot and my ankle. And all of a sudden it goes floom, and my right leg come flying out over. And then the whole thing crashed, flipped over. I landed a broadhead in my shoulder It was total miracle. The thing didn't even go through me. I don't know how it didn't. I'm laying on the ground moaning. I can't see anything. I can't feel my body. I honestly feel like I'm having like an out of body experience because I was so out of it. I felt like I had I had nearly died, and my head was hurting because I hit the tree. I hit the ground. One of the tree stands smoked me in the head somehow. I still don't know how that happened. My bow is all mangled up, and I start to hear a voice, and I'm thinking seriously, God, is that you? Maybe I am dead because it was that bad. And so I'm crawling, and this was right close to a swamp too. And I'm crawling. I've got mud in my face. I got mud everywhere. I'm crawling toward the sound, and I'm like, what in the world's this sound? And there's a voice, and I'm crawling, and all of a sudden my hands are going wherever they're going, where the sound is. And all of a sudden it's my wife. I can hear her speaking to me, crying, bawling her eyes out. And I'm like, what in the world? I thought it was God, and it was my wife. And she was screaming, honey, are you okay? Honey, are you okay? And I said, I don't know. I don't know where I'm at. So after minutes and minutes and minutes, finally I came to where I could talk to her. And she said, I heard the entire thing. I thought you were dead. So when I dropped my bag, it called her. She was the last phone call. It called her. She's like, hey, honey. And she heard the struggle for the whole entire time. And she thought, I am witnessing and I'm listening to my husband die. And the crazy thing about it was she was at work, and she's like screaming in her office, calling for help. Someone help, someone help. My husband's dying. And, I was going to put that in my book, but I didn't want it to make it about that. I wanted it to make about the buck I was after. So make a long story short, I get to the hospital. My left ankle was so bad. I had my boot tightened up even tighter because there was a humongous bulge coming through my ankle. Like I thought my foot was broke for sure. And the doctor said, when he looked at me, he said, for first thing, I was still talking weird gibberish stuff for about a week after that. Like right away when I went to the doctor, an hour or two later, he said, I could see by your blood vessels that were busted in my eyes that I shouldn't be here. I should be dead. There's no way that I should be alive. And I was upside down for so long. And they put me on the x-ray table, and I was in a wheelchair too. Like they wheeled me in. I couldn't do anything. And they said, Joseph, what foot are we looking at? And I looked up, and they took my boot off, and my foot was perfectly fine. But the nurse was out there with me, and they're like, we got to do something about this right now, because it was literally busting through my boot. It was the weirdest thing. My ankle ended up being fine, and I was fine other than a severe concussion. I went on a rampage trying to buy a bunch of stuff when I was supposed to stay home and I didn't remember doing it. Driving around town, trying to buy a 4-wheeler, trying to buy fitness equipment. And those companies calling me the next day saying, hey, Mr. Byler, did you plan on buying this stuff? And I said, oh, I didn't even know I was there. I was supposed to be home because I had a concussion. So I was out driving around the next day, and I was not supposed to be, trying to buy stuff that I didn't even know I was doing. So I was like literally a hazard out there. Crazy guy like me, like with this
You were a zombie.
Yeah, I was a zombie. Yeah, exactly.
You were a zombie.
So,
oh my goodness.
So yeah, I can relate to tree stand accidents. I use ladder stands now, but even then seems dumb, but I just feel so much more comfortable on the ground because of that accident. And, until you get in that kind of situation, I don't think anyone really understands that, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And folks, the first thing was you should never have to adjust your climber 4 times to get in the tree. That doesn't work. Secondly, safety ropes are there for a person, and you can hook in at the bottom and you stay hooked in all the time until you get up, and then you can hook in to get down on ladder stands and such things as that. But we got to be careful. But the thing that Joseph touched on is that he cried out. He said, this is not going well. And if you don't show up, whatever I know here is going to end. And it should have by all, because the blood flowed to his brain. Like he said, the blood vessels in his eyes, and I'm not a doctor, but physiologically, there's no reason for him to be here, or that he did not have serious injury other than, his concussion. So that's something that each and every one of you got to decide when it finally comes up to that. Who are you going to call on? Are you going to rely on yourself and work it through? Or are you going to just call out to God and say, if you don't show up, I'm not going to make it out of here. It's as simple as that, but it's as hard as that. But hunting brings you to those intimate places where you come and find out, who you are and what you're made of and what you believe in. And that's a personal decision all of us have to face. So Joseph, thank you for sharing that. You put me right there. And yeah, it's a scary thing when the world goes dark.
It's terrible. It's the absolute worst. That's why after that kind of incident, and I know a lot of people that this kind of thing is not quite like that, but they've fallen out of the tree stand. It makes you rethink everything, and you become a better hunter and a smarter hunter because, your other abilities have to come in play now, because sometimes you don't want to go up in a tree with a climber where you can't hang a stand. I mean, hunting the ground is just like first nature, regardless of who we think we are. So we're all ground hunters. You know what I mean? And I think there's a lot of guys popularizing it now more than, it used to be the trend as far as people are liking to do that now. But I believe it's because of these instances that happened to you and I. But people, again, it's just another lesson. If you're going to hunt the ground, don't be scared to do it. If you want to go after that buck that you see in that one spot where you don't want to go into, well, you're not going to get him unless you try it. It's only a deer. You know what I mean? And then, after that incident and still having my sights on this brow tine buck, it just made that so much sweeter, because it was almost like this entire journey from the start of seeing that deer in 2007 to 2012. It was almost like the entire thing in between and behind the scenes made that much more special. And that's why I had to write about it.
Hey, folks. Bruce Hutchin, host of Whitetail Rendezvous. Hey, I'm pleased to announce that Buckwild Coffee is continuing their sponsorship for 2019. What's so special about Buckwild Coffee? Well, a gazillion people every day go to Starbucks and buy coffee. Well, I'll ship it to your house. Yes, I'll ship light, medium, or dark roast, ground, or bean, right to your house. It's real simple. Just go to whitetailrendezvous.com/shop, pick out what roast you want, and we'll ship it out. Take a look at Buckwild Coffee, the finest roast in the West. Well, finest roast around the campfire, finest roast around your kitchen table. It's just flat out the finest roast you can get today. Order some at whitetailrendezvous.com/shop.
How can people buy the book?
So it came out about 3.5 weeks ago, and I have it on Amazon. It sells on Amazon as Zombie Deer and the Brow Tine Buck. And that'll explain a lot more about the zombie deer and some different things in there. And I'm getting it now in bookstores right now, some local bookstores. And I actually talked with a big retailer, well, the biggest in the country, and I just need to fill out some stuff. And they were really, really going to promote, like trying to get me to get things in there. They've been selling fast. A lot of people love them from ages literally 8 years old to 88. I've had people in their 80s message me and just tell them that they just absolutely loved it. The book's short and sweet, to the point, and I think it's just a great book for all ages. And I had a family and 2 girls. The mother was reading aloud to the 2 girls, and one girl was rooting for me. The other girl was rooting for the Brow Tine Buck. So throughout the whole thing. So it makes it pretty fun for people to read it. And that's why I made it around 10,000 words. Like I said, I'm thanking the Amazing Bo Jackson book from a long time ago, because this is just a different kind of book. It's not a long book. It's just a fun, nice story about hunting, because I believe every single deer has a story, but the hunter has the story to tell. And people need to tell that story, because someone's listening and they will gain some knowledge from it.
This is good stuff, folks. And we all have a story in us. And at ATA, somebody looked at me and said, Bruce, how your life's gone, your journey, you got to write a book. And I go, yeah, I got to write a book. But, I've got priorities is to get Whitetail Rendezvous to 1 million downloads. And I'm more than a quarter way there. I'm almost close to halfway. But having said that, everybody has a story, and I love the hunting stories. if you listen to any of my podcasts. But it's more than that. It's about who we are as people, who Joseph Byler is and how he came to this conclusion, because he's going to wake up a year from now, 18 months from now, and his book's going to blow up. It's pretty much that simple. And I'll say something foolish like my wife says I always do. But if you don't like his book, write me at whitetailrendezvous@gmail.com and tell me why. And then I'll consider buying the book from you.
Oh, man. You're a great host here.
But seriously, folks, and I don't know how much the book is. How much is the book?
It's $9.95 on Amazon, so in paperback. And it's sort of strange because my sister, actually, she's a really big, well-known writer. She has 6 books. She's all over the place. So she tells me some different things here and there, or I get it in a conversation about how her book sells and stuff. But I've had, I don't know how many book sales. It's been a ton of them. But they've been all but 3 have been paperback. So only 3 ebooks, which is so surprising to me.
Yeah, I would be very surprised. I'm very surprised at that.
I have no idea why, but I was at Field and Stream, actually. That's a big company up here, and they might be actually carrying it soon. The person said the cover of the book is worth the buy. So I liked hearing that from them, and maybe that's why, because some people I know, they saw the cover and they wanted that book in their hand because of the cover. And I think my wife, because
you have a cover there.
So yeah, I've got my H&R 12 gauge. All the pictures in the book, there's only a few in the end, but the cover and the back of the book, I did all from my iPhone 6, believe it or not, iPhone 6S. And my wife and my daughter took pictures of it. And then I sent all those to my editor. I mean, it's pretty amazing what you can do with a phone is a cover of a book now in bookstores. I mean, look at us. We're talking to each other. It's pretty easy. It's just crazy how things are going.
I did the whole ATA with my 6S.
That's awesome.
I did 40 interviews with sound, HD quality film, and it'll turn into podcasts, and it'll turn into blogs.
That is awesome, man.
Just with a phone.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. Folks, go buy the book. The name of the book is
Zombie Deer and the Brow Time Buck, Joseph Daniel Byler. Check it out on Amazon. Later this year, it'll probably be everywhere books are sold.
And folks, seriously, it's one of those things, once it gets the momentum that's in the pages, then it's going to go viral, and it's going to be fun for Joseph and his family. And I can't wish anything better for Joseph than to get the success that he deserves.
I appreciate that, Bruce. You're a great guy. You're a great host. And you've been talking about the ATA a lot. So I'm sure all those people got a lot of Bruce Hutchin at the ATA, which is, they're pretty fortunate and pretty lucky people.
It's a big business, but it's a small family.
You got that right.
Yeah, it really is. So with that, I'm going to say good night, folks. Good night, Joseph Byler. And don't forget, folks, Zombie Deer and the Brown Tie Buck on sale at Amazon.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.